Hey everyone, John from Beyond ARTV. It's time for another episode of my series 7 on Sunday. Today I am going to be talking about 7 musicians that tragically passed away and lost their lives in 2017. It's going to be a much more somber, down-to-earth, and probably quiet episode, but I want to pay respect to some of these musicians that definitely made such a huge impact on people in general, some of them even having a personal impact on me. Some of these were heavyweights. We thought 2016 was bad. 2017 has been just as bad for musicians that we've lost, and this community has been impacted in a very big way, with some irreplaceable figures just unfortunately departing from this world. What musician impacted you the most that we lost in 2017? Let me know down below. I'm going to be trying to reply to a lot of comments on this one just because I know this is so sensitive and fragile for so many people, and I still feel broken and sad whenever just talking about some of these people, and even whenever I was preparing for this episode, just writing down some of the causes of death, making notes and that sort of thing. It's so sad to think about these that we lost because they made such big statements, whether it be over decades or just over a few years, and they had their life cut short. So join me in paying your respects in the comments section down below. Let me know anyone that might not be on this list that you personally felt affected by. These that I'm including today are ones that I maybe had some connection to, and I obviously just couldn't include everyone, but I don't want you to think that I'm leaving anybody out. The first person that I want to talk about is Jessi Zazu of the band Those Darlings. Unfortunately, that band is no longer together, and unfortunately, Jessi is no longer in this world. She passed away at age 28 from cervical cancer. She was diagnosed just months after the band disbanded, and they were no longer a thing. She was starting to enjoy some time off, was maybe going to work on some solo material, and their band in the first place had been known in the Nashville area, I believe, for just being a statement of influencing punk and country and rock, fusing a bunch of different genres together, and she was a charismatic frontwoman of that band. And to see her diagnosed at such a young age, but to have such a big outlook on life, she was very hopeful, even to her last days, and unfortunately cancer took her life so young. Only 28 years old, such a talented singer. Go back, check out some of their music if you never heard Those Darlings, even some of her home recordings. They're all really good to listen to, and just to see somebody like this gone in the music community, it's very, very sad to see them not even get the chance to age into their 40s, 50s, 60s.
Well, lived a country boy named Johnny B. Good, who never ever learned to read or write so well, but he could play a guitar just like a ringing a bell. Go, go!
Next, we have an absolute legend on our hands in the form of Chuck Berry. Chuck Berry passed away this year at the age of 90. He had just on his 90th birthday announced his first album in decades. It was called Chuck, and it came out posthumously because, unfortunately, before it came out, he did die from a heart attack. The heart attack got Chuck, but it did not get the music that he left over the course of so many decades. Chuck had been active since the 40s and 50s. He was associated with Muddy Waters, a couple of different singers and songwriters, and he came through in a time whenever it was much harder for an African American to come through in music, and he brought something to rock and roll that took it to the mainstream. Johnny B. Good, I'm sure you've heard that song. You've seen Back to the Future, of course you have. You know the whole popular scene there. So many other top 10 hits, and over time, even though his popularity faded, those old classics stuck with people, and he continued touring throughout the 1980s and even the 90s. He was known for just kind of playing one-off shows here and there, picking up a backing band from whatever city he would go to, and there was actually a documentary made about that and about his life in general. Gregg Allman of the Allman Brothers Band died this year at age 69. He passed away due to complications from liver cancer. Cancer is such a hard thing for people to deal with. It claims so many lives, and even though we've made so many advances in modern medicine, you still see, even with the most money and the best medical treatments, sometimes it's just not enough depending on how it spreads and what parts of the body it invades. So here for Gregg Allman, known for playing with the Allman Brothers Band, obviously, that he founded, and the Gregg Allman Band as well. He founded many festivals, music festivals that still go on to this day, and other different things that made a positive impact on the community at large. I think that Gregg Allman was so talented and skilled, and you could see that come out into their music. In fact, I got into the Allman Brothers whenever I was in my teenage years. I didn't have a ton of exposure, but thanks to the song Jessica appearing on one of the Guitar Hero games, it definitely piqued my curiosity, and I would ask my parents about them, and even though they weren't into a ton of music like that, they were fans of the Allman Brothers band, and I think I got my exposure from there, and it just continued to grow. And I'm not going to pretend to be the biggest fan in the world or anything like that. I just want to pay my respects and say that I appreciate so much the contributions that Gregg Allman made. He was an absolute legend. He was so respected, and I wish I had gotten to see him perform live.
There's been a load of compromising on the road to my horizon, but I'm gonna be where the lights are shining on me.
Traditional country music star Glen Campbell's passing had a particular impact on me because he passed away due to Alzheimer's disease. He was 81 years old, and Alzheimer's has been something that has just cruelly swept away family members of mine, including grandparents and grandpa that I was particularly close to. And it's such an evil disease. It wipes you of your mind. And people recall in Glen Campbell's final days and years how he just couldn't remember lyrics. He would forget certain names and that sort of thing, but the music always kind of stuck with him. In fact, whenever he was diagnosed in 2011, he was very, very open about it. He went out on a final tour. They made a documentary about it that came out in 2014. And it was very special because it enlightened people more so on the disease, I think. And we're getting so close to a cure. But it is an absolute devil of a disease. If you know a family member or a friend who's been affected by that, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It strips people of who they are. It makes them forget everything. They can't even take care of themselves. And I hate to see a legend go out like that, but the Rhinestone Cowboys sailed out without his memory. I just hope that there's something better for him on the other side.
She moved down here at the age of 18. She blew the boys away, it was more than they'd seen. I was introduced and we both started grooving. She said, I dig you, baby, but I got to keep moving on. Keep moving on.
These next three in particular really had an effect on me personally just because I had some sort of closeness to them. And the first of those is Tom Petty. Tom Petty is the most recent death that we have on this list that I'm recording in October 2017. I know the year's not over yet. I really hope that we don't have any other deaths in 2017 that I have to talk about at a later date. But Tom Petty passed away recently. He went under cardiac arrest, a heart attack, and ended up passing away from complications from that. Originally, TMZ reported that he was dead and had been pronounced dead, and CBS reported this as well. It ended up being fake, and then he was actually clinging to life. So everybody was just kind of thrown in the mix. We were in the turmoil of, is he alive, is he okay, or is he actually dead? But once we heard the impact that the heart attack it had and how serious it was, he was essentially brain dead at that point. We knew that it wasn't looking good, as family members had chosen to pull the plug. Tom Petty died at age 66. He was known for his own solo stuff. You know him for hits like Wildflower, and obviously Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. You know the classics like Mary Jane's Last Dance, Free Fallin'. I was exposed to his music whenever I was a kid because my parents actually had several of the Heartbreakers records on vinyl, and I loved listening to those. I didn't know them a ton, but at the same time it made me curious about their music and I wanted to hear more. And then in 2008, I believe it was, I knew the Free Fallin' cover that my friends would always listen to. John Mayer did a cover of that at one of his concerts. It came out on a live DVD, and I went back and listened to the original. And for a while I didn't like the Mayer version because I was clinging to that original version by Petty, which obviously no one will ever top. But that moment is such a staple in time. It left a dent because everybody knows that song. Everybody probably has some sort of connection and can sing the majority of the words to it. It's an absolute classic. And to see a legend like this go at a relatively young age, 66 is not that old. Unfortunately, he passed away. He had just been playing concerts. He wrapped up a tour in 2017. And then to see him go like this is absolutely tragic. Chris Cornell of Soundgarden and Audioslave fame passed away this year at the age of 52, and it was so unfortunate. Unlike most, my first exposure to Chris Cornell was not through Soundgarden, actually. It was through Audioslave. I was just getting into music in 2005, 13 years old, and I remember falling in love with Be Yourself because I didn't feel like I could be myself at that time. To be yourself is all that you can do, is the message of that song. He says that over and over on the chorus. I was falling in love with the guitars of Tom Morello and seeing all of the instrumentation here as I purchased their album and loved it from front to back. It's something that I listened to over and over again. I remember just taking a cassette tape of a couple of the recordings that I have of some of the tracks, like Doesn't Remind Me, Be Yourself, Like a Stone, and playing them at the beach whenever I didn't have a CD player or anything like that. I was just ripping them from the radio, and I was mesmerized by the talent that Chris Cornell possessed. And obviously, this is something that is harder for me to talk about because he did pass away this year due to suicide. He killed himself by hanging. It was right after a Michigan show. He had played to an audience of adoring fans, but sometimes that adoration just isn't enough. It's something where they don't feel the love, and we're going to talk about that even more with my next one that is on this list today. But Chris didn't feel that love, apparently, and he was struggling internally. With Soundgarden, he was a massive legend, obviously super unknown in '94, broke them onto the scene. Songs that came off of that album and ones that followed, Rusty Cage, and obviously the classics like Spoon Man, Black Hole Sun. There were so many impactful statements as they just transcended grunge. They started off in that movement, but I feel like they became so much more as a band. And even whenever they returned with an album in 2012, even though it wasn't their best, you could still see the heart and all the soul and passion, that fiery feel that Cornell would give his performances. That voice will go down in the history books, and we lost him far, far too young.
Discomfort endlessly has pulled itself upon me, distracting, reacting. Against my will I stand beside my own reflection. It's haunting how I can't see.
I'm sure a lot of you that follow my channel knew this next one was coming, and I'm going to try to keep this brief because I have already talked about it several times. But of course, we have to talk about Chester Bennington of Linkin Park. Chester was only 41 years old whenever he took his own life. He killed himself by hanging, and this was July 20th of this year. And I remember that date's going to stick in my mind because that was a horrible day for me. I was at work when my girlfriend gave me a call, and she was crying already, and I knew something was wrong. And I knew, or almost right away, that somebody had died. Somebody not in my family or anything like that, but she was alluding to the fact that somebody that I loved and respected had died. And Chester Bennington was unfortunately that individual. He was the lead singer of Linkin Park, one of the co-leads alongside Mike Shinoda. And it's something where it's hard for me to talk about because it did make such an impact on my life. Chester knew that he was loved, I feel like at times, by his fans, and he could sense that. He would connect with them oftentimes in the audience, and he had such a powerful voice and scream to him, and he was just exuberant. You can see plenty of videos of just him being the life of the band and being so welcoming to fans, even interviewers, guests, and people that would feature on Linkin Park albums. It's so many memories that we have to look through, and we look back on his life, and even though he was the ultimate rock star, he had everything, millions and millions of fans, people who loved him, a family with kids. It's not selfish to take your own life. That's what people say so much, I feel like, in the comments. It's not selfish whenever you're not in your right mindset. Do you think that Chester Bennington, of his own accord, being in his right mind, would ever take his life and leave a family with the young kids behind? No, absolutely not. That's why we need to acknowledge that this is a disease. The depression, the way that he was feeling, you don't even feel human. You don't feel like yourself. You are not in your right mindset. And we cannot put the blame on somebody like that and say, how dare you leave your family behind? Instead, we need to have discussions about what led to this in the first place, what can prevent it, even medications, therapy, just talking to people. That's it for this episode of SOS today, guys. Leave your respects in the comment section down below. Are there other musician deaths in 2017 that impacted you? Please let me know in the comment section. Let's have a discussion on this one. Anyways, I will see you next week for hopefully a lighter episode of SOS once again, getting back to normal. Make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future uploads. If you want to see the video where I talked about Chester right after he passed away, it's right here, or last week's episode of SOS you can see right here. Everything else you can find linked in the description down below. I don't feel right doing a bunch of plugs or anything on this video, but anyways, thank you so much for watching. This was a harder video to make. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you very soon on Beyond ARTV.